now you're testing out all of these different mediums, but you're not having to do a separate campaign for each one of them. So I think that's where that overwhelming element comes from, where it's like, wow, I don't have time to do all this content for all these things. Well, you do have time if you're willing to kind of think about that experience that you can create on these different mediums.
In recent years, we've seen a dramatic shift in how people engage with brands and how brands engage with people. Many marketing strategies are now dominated by digital content campaigns, social media engagement, and educational thought leadership designed to go both broad and deep with audiences across a myriad of channels. In this new world, one of the most difficult challenges is to keep up with the demands for content. We're now expected to create short, timely, and relevant information in both written and video format each and every day. For most businesses, this is a daunting task. But one way to get on board is to push the damn button and get yourself in the mindset of continuous content creation. Welcome to Video in Focus, the show that explores the expanding role of video in modern marketing and sales and how to build better relationships through purposeful video content. I'm your host, Tyler Lessard, and today we're speaking with Brian Fanzo, a computer science major who worked in cybersecurity for the US government, but eventually found his calling as an online video creator. Brian now speaks with businesses and audiences around the world to help them understand how to use video on a daily basis to deliver a more authentic and more trustworthy brand experience.
I was a computer science major that worked for the US government in cybersecurity. And I was never, I would say, a traditional massive geek, but I found kind of my niche in what I said, translating the geek speak.
Right.
And so I could work with military officials on, hey, this is what the teams are doing. I could go back and sit with the gurus that wanted Mountain Dew and be left alone and say, hey, what are you doing? You know, kind of connecting those dots. And I fell in love with like the power of collaboration and really how do we bring people together. And that kind of allowed me to move from cybersecurity to become an evangelist, which is really my dream job. It was built after kind of Guy Kawasaki and what he was doing at Apple. And I did that at a data center for 2 years. And that kind of spawned into me doing speaking on many stages for that company and really taking a much more social media face role. I became like kind of the face of the brand. And that led into this whole idea of personal branding and putting my story out there. And it was amazing. And the company got bought about 2 years and 10 days after I was there. Yep. And my CEO just came to me and said, hey, today's your last day and it's the start of your entrepreneur journey. And so that was about almost 5 years ago. 5 years ago next month was when that went down. And now I host a podcast. I'm a full-time speaker, doing about 60, 70 events a year. Yep. And I really focus on brands, not only integrating that trust, but how do we look at collaboration, community in our marketing and our sales. And then ultimately, how do we get people to change? I love change. I love helping people see the light. And that's where Press the Damn Button came from. It was, I would inspire somebody, I would motivate them, yet they would still not do that last step. And so it was like, I got you excited about change. I convinced you that change is a necessary step, but you still didn't take it. And so that's where we kind of come full circle with this.
Yeah. So it's over the last little while, you mentioned the word change, which I think is really important right now. I mean, it's always changing in the world of business communications, marketing, sales, social. These days, change is really the constant.
For sure.
But as you look back over the last, let's say 5 to 10 years, what have you seen as the big undercurrents of what's driving the need for companies to change and embrace some of these new ideas?
So I think it's like we were, interesting times. I'm a pager wearing millennial, which just means I'm an old millennial, and I know what a pager is, right? And I wear that on stage. That's kind of my thing. And I think it's funny, like living, if you think about the .com boom and a lot of those times where all of a sudden technology was for the businesses and the brands and the big companies. And then slowly things were catching up. And now I think we've almost gone the other way where now consumers have more power, more connection, more information. I mean, we were able to do more research on our phone than we were able to do in 2 weeks worth of work 10 years ago. And I think with the consumers coming back into power, us as brands and as businesses have to realize that nobody wants to be sold to, nobody wants to be marketed to. And that changes, not only is change evolving from an innovation and technologies perspective, but it's interesting to see that not much is changing when it comes to what people respond to, right? We still respond to trust, we were talking about. We still respond to people, right? I remember my dad telling me in high school, like, son, my dad was always like, I'm a good sales guy because he knew that it was a people game. And he always was a handshake person. He would drive over just to, do that. And interestingly enough, the more digital we get, the more innovative we get, I think the more important those moments of of emotion, those moments of connectivity exist. And I think it's a fun balance, because we have to change as we innovate, while at the same time figuring out ways to not change and lose touch to the things that we've kind of done along the way that make us successful.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of kind of what's new is old again.
It is.
Right?
That's very true.
It's being very personal, being one-to-one, but doing it. Digital gives us the chance to do it at scale if we do it right.
Correct.
And I think that's actually one of the nice things that I've come to appreciate as a marketer is, social is one channel for that, and there's other channels.
For sure.
But it's that delicate balance of how do we use those mediums to scale our reach, but without mitigating and losing that personal element and ultimately then that trust, which is so fickle and so easy to do.
For
right?
sure.
And it's something that I think you do a great job of teaching people that balance. And one of the words I know you use a lot is to be relatable.
Right.
I'd love for you to just talk a bit about that and where that comes from and how you think about relatability in the business world today, whether you're B2C, B2B, human to human. How does that manifest itself for companies right now?
So I think, when we look at the word, look at relatable, and, not only links to trust, but we have like authenticity and transparency. And I think sometimes they're thrown into buzzwords, and that's, mostly marketers' fault. We can take our own blame for that one.
Yeah.
But when we, when you look at think about relatability and you think about the core values of why we bought certain things, or I always like to use, why did my dad always wanted to go to the hole-in-the-wall restaurant when we traveled on vacation? And I was always like, the Olive Garden's right there, and why aren't we going, and he was always say things like, hey, I know that's family owned. I care that my dollars are going to somebody.
Right.
And I think we are not only still living that, but we have a younger generation that has grown up with the technology, and when they can realize and touch and feel and connect with somebody at a deeper level, it's very valuable, right? And it's oftentimes not only changing what purchased product or service that they actually want to drive, but it's also that relatability on saying, like, how do I know that they're going to keep up with change? And I think the more that a brand can compel someone to say, hey, I might not be the best service or product at the moment, but you can trust me through relatability that I understand your problem and I'm going to help you along the way, right? T-Mobile, John Legere is, I think, a great example of this. Is I'm an AT&T user, and I've switched to T-Mobile for my second device, and it's not the best service that I've ever had. It's not, and there's some things there, but I don't know the CEO. I couldn't tell you if it's a female or male CEO of AT&T. Yet I can trust and connect with John because he's relatable. He uses live content, and so for me, I don't have to trust. I'm ultimately spending money with T-Mobile in the long play, right? I know I can relate to him. I know he can relate to my pain points. And I think to your point on kind of that the beginning part of this is like, we have to look at content, video, conversations. I always hear the argument, and people will say, we have to go wide, right? We have to get all the following. And then we have to say, don't go wide, go deep. And I would say, be strategic when you go wide and when you go deep. And I think we can do both, but we can't do both with like one piece of content or one style of medium. And I think that's something creative for marketers now is, hey, yes, you're creating this great piece of content, but how are you going to use it in one instance to go deep versus the other instance to grow? And I think it's a evolving door on how that works, because consumers, as we see them take on new platforms and new styles, we have to look at that. And I don't look at it for what's the new app. Like, I don't care about TikTok, the app itself. I care about what is compelling consumers to be there for so long, and what is so unique about that I can then integrate that into maybe a video on my website or even my email newsletter, taking those components and kind of adjusting. And I think that's the fun of the new world we're living in, is we get instant feedback, we get all this data, and it's now our job to be strategic when we go deep versus when we go wide.
This whole idea of going deep and wide at the same time may have you content marketers out there sweating a bit. It's really tough, right? Because the type of content that appeals to your broad following is very different from what appeals to niche segments who care about very specific topics. But that's exactly why we need to move beyond producing a small number of large written pieces each month to a process of continuously creating what I think of as micro content, designed to drive short bursts of engagement across different channels. Now, this micro content doesn't need to be super polished, and it doesn't need to last forever. It's about getting your audience's attention for 2 to 3 minutes per day, rather than trying to get them to read one major piece for an hour. This approach can not only make your content more timely and shareable, but it can enable you to create both breadth content and depth content at greater scale.
And I think that's also the power of the mobile device, right? All of a sudden, mobile, we often think about mobile as the consumer, right? We have to get mobile friendly,
right.
But it's also mobile creation and mobile content. And I like to say, real-time content, I think anyone can do it. But understanding the right time to deliver that content is the magic sauce, right? And I think that includes the medium that you're using it. I think we're in this fun space where I think we looked at content needing to be evergreen because of the amount of time and money we put into creating it, right? It was like, hey, we're spending all this time and money, it better drive us leads. And I use the example on stage, like we weren't even creating video, like our About Us page videos were used with actors because we didn't want to reshoot it if one of the people in the About Us was fired from the company. I mean, that's how we were thinking, and now it's almost laughable, right? How are we conveying trust about our company if we're using actors to talk about the values of our company? And I think that's a fun evolution. It's also, when we talk about trust, we talk about the consumer trust. It also requires us to trust the marketer, right? Like if we have a teams of marketers, social media manager now being able to reply to a customer service tweet by replying on video is such a powerful thing. I got one just the other day. I'm a big hat guy, and the brand new hat that I got was bleeding. The brim was bleeding up on like the second day I was owning it. And the person from New Era sent me a direct message via Twitter direct message. So it was a private, but picked up the video camera and was like, I can't believe this. And he had the hat on for a different cut. And he's like, I'm not seeing it right now. And it won me over. And my immediate thought was, how cool is it that company, top down and bottom up, trust them enough to say, hey, pick up, because when we can all complain about customer service, but if we know that there's a human behind it, or we can see the human, that's a big piece. So I think trusting the not only new hires, but trusting that we can kind of fire off some of this content. Because I think that's the downside I feel sometimes when it comes to brands in the real-time game, is that they have the gear, they have the mindset, and oftentimes they even have the strategy, but the process they have in place. Yes, when you go to that event, capture these things, but come back to us and get it legal approved and you're like, wait a second, you enabled all of us to do it and to live there. And I think this is where, I think if we move forward in this, a lot of things come down to risk versus reward in this new real-time game, right? Like what's the true risk of someone putting that video out on our channel? And then if that reward outweighs it, kind of leaning into that.
It's such an important topic. And let's dive into it a little bit further, is this idea of enablement of our employees. And then, trust is a huge part of that.
For sure.
But I think a big piece that a lot of businesses need to think about is, how do they help them? How do they help their employees? How do they help different teams actually do this? Because I think the trust will come from
without question
that level of knowing, okay, you understand what you're doing and I'm helping you get there. And, there's no shortage of cycles in business where we are enabling and educating our users. I'm an old, I worked at BlackBerry for 10 years.
I played a BlackBerry video on stage today. I was one of the first ones ever to use a BlackBerry International phone.
So it was such an interesting era where you had businesses that were fighting adoption of BlackBerries for fear of risk and security and other things. And ultimately, it came a point where it had to become an enablement strategy as opposed to a command and control strategy. For sure. And it was, unfortunately, it was spearheaded because they felt, well, they're going to do it anyway, so I should. But the smarter businesses were like, no, wait a minute, our employees should be doing this because there's so much value that can come from it. But we have to, help them understand why and how and where they can get with it. And I think, we've seen lots of cycles of that with social and other things. When it comes to tools like video, like employees actually engaging as real humans online and with more real time and quick content, how do you see companies tackling that problem of enabling their employees to the point where they can trust different teams to do it?
So I call it my 3 T's, and the training element, and it's funny that the 3 T's, but the 3 T's, the order of the T's actually, in my opinion, matter more than anything else. Okay. And it's trust, training, technology, and in that order. And that trust is one where I usually dive into in the sense of, it's not only trusting that your boss gives you the ability to leverage what you're being trained on, but it's also a trust that you're getting the best technology or solution to implement it, and also trusting that you're going to get rewarded when you do make these changes, right? It's like one of those weird things where we're like,
Yeah.
well, we trusted them to do it, but we weren't going to reward or incentivize. We weren't going to celebrate. And we gave them a tool that was, and I worked for the government. We were giving out tools, or we were deploying tools that were 5 years older than what was mainstream. And so I always say like that trust is such an important one. And then the second one has to be training. And I think training today has to move away from the blocking and tackling to philosophy and understanding where, and like personal branding is a big topic for me. And I think where personal branding, employee advocacy has failed forever is that we've forgot to teach and train people on how, not only how to tell their story, but how telling their story helps the brand and them individually, right? And like we'll train them on a new employee advocacy tool, we'll train them on a new video tool, but we won't train them on the down cycle things. And all of a sudden you're like, why is no one using it? And you're like, well, your KPIs for their job is this and this. Nowhere are they even rewarded for telling their story, right?
Yeah.
And then we're not even training them on, how do you take a relationship online, offline? How do you take things a little deeper, especially within sales teams? And then the last one I think is technology, right? I think if you have the trust and you train on that why rather than on the what, the technology can come and go, or it can drastically pivot. We've talked about even with Vidyard, like I love the evolution. Like I'm a B2B enterprise guy. But I also run my own business as an entrepreneur. And so for me, when I can leverage parts of a tool while also knowing that there's a bigger play, that's exciting, but you also have to be able to evolve, right? If you're not prepared for that, then it's really not going to matter. And I think this is that weird spot where I think we underestimate the value of training. We don't think about trust in all of those different pieces. And weirdly, we start with technology. Yeah. And I think starting with the technology, I like to say, technology will never fix stupid, or technology will never solve a people problem. Yeah. And too often we throw technology at a people problem. And it's like, solve the people, build the trust, train them on why they should be using it. The technology becomes a lot easier to use.
Trust, training, and technology. This is an approach that's relevant to many facets of what we do in business, but particularly important when you think about enabling your teams and your people to create and share video. One of the traps you can easily fall into is focusing too much on the technology itself and not enough on helping people understand how to effectively communicate on camera, how to come across as human and authentic, and how to embrace video as a medium in a way that works well for them. One thing I've learned in my 5 years here at Vidyard is that there's no single formula for a great video. Every business and every individual needs to experiment to find their own way and to learn how to make their personalities truly shine on camera. You can't always teach someone what their approach should be, but you can guide them on that process and put your trust in them that they will learn and evolve.
It's funny, the press the damn button tagline, it was video was where that kind of came from, and then it morphed into like telling your story. But one of the things I think was kind of like a misnomer on when people would assume that, they're like, well, Brian, you just want people to go on video, using video all the time. And I was like, no, press the damn button was the idea that you will not realize the power of video or how to do video to actually do it. But there is an element of once you're started and you get that little, okay, this is really easy. And now it's important to have a strategy. But there's also, to your point, there's also an element where we can tell stories in so many different ways on video that you don't know how those ways work for you until you try them. Like no one that's, from a practical side, if you've never done video, you can't tell me if walking and talking video for you works or not, right? And for people that don't really, like, walking and talking video has so much power at the moment, and it's like that weird spot of it gives people that appearance that it's so important that you had to push out the video immediately. Like one of my most popular videos of all time that I've ever done on LinkedIn, hundreds of thousands of views, is me walking out of HubSpot's inbound event holding my phone. And the amount of people that stopped and said, wow, Brian, you captured me because it must have been so important for you to tell me that I just watched. And so I think that is a spot to get people to go, and I give advice with, hey, people, vertical video is we're not used to consuming it. It's very new in that sense. Like, how do we get people used to that? I tell people, hey, FaceTime with your family 5 times this week. So you get used to seeing yourself, but you also get used to like all of a sudden this other landscape, right? Like for me, as someone that talks with their hands, I love to move, vertical became really natural. And that's where Instagram stories became somewhere where I was testing things, and people were like, well, why haven't you launched on a YouTube channel? I was like, well, YouTube, I felt more, constrained in that, weirdly enough, in that box. And it also had like a polished and produced side, and so I look at things like that. I also think when we're managing expectations, right? I think when you're looking at video, especially starting off, everyone's bad at it. We all have lots of little quirks that and when I say bad, and this is the other piece that, I think when we're kind of looking at video, what a great video is determined by the audience, not by us, right? Like, even those of us that love this case, we feel like we created a great video and nobody watches it. Like, you're like, yep,
amazing.
Man, I killed that. And like,
drone footage was fantastic.
I mean, just because it was 4 minutes long, it was because I was doing it, right? And like, nobody's going to watch that. But I think that's also something to remember. And I think it's been one of the lessons that I think for brands that I've loved working with is that I'll do things like live video, and I'll do an Instagram stories takeover, and then we'll do like a produced video, in the studio, and they'll be amazed on the variety of types of engagement, types of value.
Right.
And I always remind them and say, okay, well, think about how different the delivery was, even though quote unquote the overall content is the same.
Yeah.
And so I look at a practical way as not being afraid to test out multiple different ones.
Yeah.
And if you're capturing video, let's say you're capturing, and I'm all for like, this is another one, I love live video, but I believe live video has a place, but there's plenty of opportunity and places where live video doesn't work best for the scenario, and it doesn't make sense, right? And I think this is that opportunity too, where hey, if you are creating some piece of content that you believe is going to be great, doing a live behind the scenes, right? And then doing maybe in the moment Instagram stories where you're vertical, and you're testing out all of these different mediums, but you're not having to do a separate campaign for each one of them. So I think that's where that overwhelming element comes from, where it's like, wow, I don't have time to do all this content for all these things. Well, you do have time if you're willing to kind of think about that experience that you can create on these different mediums.
Now, as you embark on creating all this great content and enabling others in your business to do the same, you're often faced with the question of what type of gear to invest in. There's no shortage of options today for gadgets and gear that can help you capture great content. But if you overcomplicate it, you can actually hinder people's ability to capture on-the-fly video. So I asked Brian about what type of gear he uses today to ensure he's always ready to press the damn button.
So as much as I'm a geek for tech and gear, and I have everything that imaginable, and I'm the guy that with every piece of software as well. Yeah. When it comes down to, I'm a keep it simple, stupid guy, right? Like, hey, give me a tool that's going to operate. And the phone is amazing, and especially today. And I always remind people there's a back camera as well as a forward camera on the phone, right? Like sometimes we forget that there is
better camera.
Yeah, there's a better camera on the back there. But I think for me, when we're starting to think about consumption of video, because we're getting so much. The video that we're getting in our feed is a lot. Yeah. And unfortunately, Facebook Live, I would say, kind of proved to us that, there's so much bad video that out there, right? Just because, the stat of 84% of, online traffic will be video by 2022, which is that Cisco stat, it does not mean it's good video. Yeah. I think we have to start looking at it and saying, okay, what are things that people are tolerating versus what are things that people are like nice to haves? And I think, the tripod is like the first one, right? And I think, I have I love the small bendy tripods. Yep. And I mean, to the point where I have one in my car, I have one on my desk. Like even my daughters are joking. They're like, Daddy, is that one in your luggage? I was like, yeah, because, they're $10, $12, you throw them in there. And it's amazing just that little bit, even if you're walking and talking, holding it versus, because holding your phone out is just never good. And your muscles aren't even used to that. So I think, tripod is definitely one that's important. We've heard the adage where people they'll watch a video that has bad video, but they won't listen to one that has bad audio. I still question that because we also at the same time use the stat that most people aren't watching video with the sound on until a later time. Sure. So I'm a big fan of captions. Yes. Like I think captioning is important. I will tell you, I'm sometimes I wouldn't say a lazy captioner. I would say strategic, where 30 seconds into the video, I will use a caption that says, this video will no longer be captioned. If you've made it this far, you should turn on the volume. Oh, right. I literally call it out because I'm like, you're listening to this, and you get that 30 seconds spot. Like, okay, now you probably do need to turn it on. And for me, that way, I'm still giving that initial viewer that's not watching. Right. And there's some great software. I think captioning has come a long way, thankfully. There's a tool called quick.io, QUICC.io, that I absolutely love. It allows you to do captions with fun colors and fonts that they have built in, which I think now adds another element of storytelling, right? Where I'm playing with that. So I think captions are important, which is, you would have asked me a year ago, that's not a place I would have gone. And then there is, it is video or audio, and understanding the role of audio. And there's plenty of places. I mean, you and I both, we were watching the video. I'm an AirPod guy, right? Like, and it's amazing just using the AirPod, how much different the audio quality is for your phone, and it does a great job of taking out wind noise and doing those things. And I'm also a big believer, if you are using mobile, having something that allows you to add what you need but not do too much. And there's a company, actually, they sponsor my podcast, but it's called iOgrapher. And they do some the great cases that you can snap in any phone, but it has a soft shoe mount, 2 soft shoe mounts on it. So if you want to use a microphone that is pointing at you, or you want to use a light, I know lighting is a big one. You can clip those right onto the case, and so now it's not like this craziness. But I think these are all things too that kind of evolve. Like I was just recently convinced. I was doing a vlog, and the vlog I was doing from my mobile phone because that's kind of who I am. Yep. And even though I own a DSLR, and I had a friend that was like, just try this Sony point and click, just to see the differences. And I can tell you it took me a little bit because now I have to take it from the disc and I have to mirror it to my computer, and it's not on my phone as easy to share. But I started to see value in color blending and no shadows, things that the phone doesn't have. And so I think there are definitely places to go there as you're moving. But it is amazing. I think the newest iPhones and Androids that are out there are the best. Like when I talk mobile, if you are using an iPhone 6, it is a drastic difference between the 6 and the newer ones. I think tripod is important. I think, of course, audio, the captioning is so much easier now, even using a rev.com and then getting it back to you in minutes. And the other piece of it is don't be afraid to use what you're comfortable with, which is a web camera in many cases. Right. Most of the time when I'm getting an executive on board, they can talk webinar into their computer all day long. Right. But I put the phone up and it's like a whole different person. And I'm like, well, you know what? Let's just use the web camera. And we can record on web camera. We can do, and it's amazing. Even something as small as not using the phone and talking into the web camera, that gets you that bug that says, oh, this isn't really good. And I travel with a web camera, a portable web camera, in my bag for that exact reason, because in many cases, the web camera for the environment I'm in, I'm like, this is perfect. Right. I'm just going to use the web camera, even though I have a DSLR and a phone next to me. So I think that is kind of the fun variety of gear. Yeah,
that's great. And I think that adage of, keep it simple to start. Yep. But I think for a lot of people, I encourage you to have fun with it. Yes. Learn and enjoy the learning process of, trying out microphones. And you can get so much interesting, gears, basic software for very little cost. And I know for myself, that's been part of my success in just, getting get better at creating video is having some fun with it. The best video I created was one I did with my son with a film about our dog as if he could talk. And it was almost like, for me, it was a challenge to see. I wanted to learn some new editing software. Right. So I said, hey, do you want to make a fun video? Of course, he's all over it. Of course, right? Yes. This is amazing. Yep. And I think for a lot of people, starting to do that for your own, just for your own understanding of how things work, and whether or not you're going to be producing video yourself, starting to get those basics on how simple editing might work in post and things like that, I think can just develop a great appreciation and honestly can be a lot of fun when you start to get into it.
And you can, and also I think the other thing about video that we kind of forget sometimes is that we talked about relatability earlier, right? Becoming relatable on video, the majority of the people that are watching your video have never pressed the damn button in their entire life. Right? They're immediately in awe of you, even if you believe it's horrible. Yeah. And so hey guys, I have a new microphone. How's this sounding? You'd be amazed by being a little bit humble there and kind of exposing that you're testing. Not only do people are people inspired by that because they're not doing the video, but you'd be amazed at how many people will come to your defense and provide tips and tools. And I mean, some of the best relationships I have with brands and even businesses was I got on a video and someone was very raw and transparent, and I ended up giving them an hour's worth of free consulting because I was like, you captivated me and I love your content. And I think that sometimes we forget that. We're like, okay, well, people that are going to watching are wanting it perfect. And well, no, they've never done what you're doing. So you're already bleeding edge to them, and being able to be something like, hey, or I'll do things sometimes like, hey guys, I'm sorry if there's a little wind noise right now. I can't really tell how windy it is. And I will have people in the comments, no wind noise at all, Brian. And even if there is, I'd still listen. Yeah. And I'm like, how amazing is that? And it's as simple as putting it out there. You're right. And that's part of the fun.
Yeah. I love it. All right. So I think this is an amazing conversation, and there's lots of other things that we will point to for those of you that want to learn how to get going with video. Brian, yourself, where can people find out more about yourself or some of the resources that you've got out there to help them get going on pressing the damn button?
Sure. So my company and brand is iSocialFanz with the letter I at the front, Z or Z at the end. That's a media hub. So podcasts, I have 3 podcasts, all that content, my gear. And then interested in speaking side of the house is brianfanzo.com is my new speaker site that I have up there. And so I speak, 60 events a year. We get the to travel and see you as well. And and for me, I think when we look at social media and connecting, I'm on every channel under the brand iSocialFanz. But I think in today's day and age, I never say like, don't follow me on every channel. Pick your favorite channel and consume there. And it's surprising because people are like, wait, why would you suggest that? And I think we are inundated and we are overwhelmed. And even if you're going to be active on multiple channels, having to follow everyone is kind of silly. So iSocialFanz, you pretty much pick any channel that's out there. I'm pretty active there, mainly because that's kind of how I can convey what's going on to my audience. But iSocialFanz.com and BrianFanzo.com.
These ideas of continuous content creation, a micro content strategy, and enabling people across your business to become content creators is so important for the future of marketing. It's a new way to think about your content, social, and thought leadership strategies that better aligns with audience expectations, while also allowing you to scale your content across multiple channels and audiences without hiring lots of new people. It's genuinely a win-win. It's not to say that you shouldn't create longer form content, but if your entire content strategy is still built on writing ebooks and blog posts, well, it's time to press the damn button. Thanks for joining us on Video in Focus, brought to you by the fine folks here at Vidyard. If you enjoyed the show, give it a like or a share, hit that subscribe button for future episodes, and check out the podcast version now available as part of the Creating Connections podcast series.